Hello everyone, happy August, welcome to August, as if it's already August. Can I say August any more times? I am filming this on the 31st of July, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so if between now and midnight I suddenly do get another favourite for this month, I'll mention it in next month's favourites. I think I'm starting to get a cold. I started to feel a slight tickle in my throat last night, and this morning I woke up and it only really got worse. I'm still speaking fine. I've not got a runny nose or anything like that, but I can just feel that it's just a little bit uncomfortable. So bear with. This month we've had a bit of a plot twist, but we'll get to that. First, I'm going to start with TV shows. I don't have any movies. I do really want to watch Barbie and Oppenheimer, but I'm not desperate enough for either of them that I've gone out of my way to watch them this month. But I've heard really good things. So my first TV show is, my only TV show is Black Mirror, which I think I've mentioned quite a few times on this channel. The 6th season came out. I don't know if it came out this month or last month, but I only watched it this month, and it was really good. I might do another ranking of the 5 episodes, because I've already done a ranking of all the episodes from seasons 1 to 4, I think. But I think I want to talk about the 5 episodes in this season, but it was very, very good. Now, here comes the plot twist. We're going to talk about books. You may have noticed a serious lack of books in my June favourites, despite really having tried to do at least a book a month and always finish the books in the months. Unfortunately, June was just a very, very busy month for me, and I didn't get a chance to read much or at all. And there was a book that I'd started in May that I don't think I looked at all in June, and there was a book that I started in June but just did not get around to finishing at all. And I finished both of those this month, and one of them I do have a physical copy of, but I left it upstairs, and it's Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. And this definitely took me a while to get into, but once I finally really got into it and just read so much of it in the space of a few days, I loved it. It reminded me quite a bit of both To Kill a Mockingbird and I've forgotten the other book. I can't believe I've forgotten it, but there is another book that it reminded me of as well. The only thing I have to say about this book is I didn't like the ending. And for me, the ending plays such an important part in whether or not I like a book. But I loved so much of the book, and it was literally just the last 2 pages maybe that I thought it's not a strong ending. But that's my personal opinion. Probably people disagree with that. But it wasn't a satisfying ending. It felt rushed, the ending, and I don't know, I didn't like it. Moving on to the second book, which I started in May, and I started with a physical copy and then I went onto my phone for an ebook. It's The Slap by, I'm going to mispronounce this name, I'm very sorry, Christos Tsiolkas. I was recommended this book by my grandfather and I didn't enjoy reading it. I think it was a good concept and I can't fault the narrative necessarily, and that's why it is in my favourites, because I think objectively it probably is a good book, but the writing was so disgusting and vulgar and unpleasant, and I hated reading it. It was just gross and unpleasant and not necessary. It just didn't feel necessary. Even just thinking about it now, this is one of the reasons why I really struggled to finish it. Because as I say, I actually think the content itself was good, but the writing was just so gross that I didn't enjoy it. But I am a very goody two-shoes, clean girl, I don't swear, I don't do anything like that, so I'm asexual as well, and that does make a difference with this book, at least the kind of asexual that I am. So yeah, it wasn't a nice read, it wasn't a pleasant read, but I can't fault the book itself necessarily. Moving on, I thought, I've probably got time for a non-fiction, but I was like, I'm gonna just dip my toes in. So I found one that was an hour long, I think, on audiobook, and it's Creativity, a Short and Cheerful Guide by John Cleese. This was a nice read, but I don't think it was too informative for me. I don't really feel that I came away learning anything from it, which is usually my intention with non-fiction books. But it was a very easy read and nice, just nice. Then I figured I still had time for another non-fiction, and the one I went for was Any Ordinary Day by Lee Sales. And this one is heavy. This one's really heavy. I listened to this one, again, as an audiobook, read by the author, who is Australian. Now, if you're new to this channel, you might not know that I try to avoid listening to audiobooks when they're narrated by Australian people, just because for me that's not a pleasant reading experience. I don't enjoy listening to the Australian accent. And I'd read the blurb of this one and it sounded so interesting. So then when I started it and I heard the Australian accent, I thought, oh no, am I gonna push through? And I did. And I'm very glad I did. But I think this one needs to come with a warning sign. So, trigger warning, because I am going to talk about the book just a little bit. Trigger warning mostly for death, I think. Lee Sales is a journalist who has dealt with a lot of people having to deal with really terrible things. And she goes around and speaks to these people saying, how do you keep going when things like this happen? Or how do you feel like you could prevent it? Or how do you feel about God? Or, you know, there's so many really interesting questions. And these are all situations where you pray that it will never ever happen to you, but you do think, oh my goodness, you know, if I was in that situation, would I be able to keep going? And how would I respond? And it's a really hard read. It's very intense. And it's left me walking away with a lot of thoughts, and not all of them positive ones. In fact, most of them probably not. It's almost made me a bit more scared about life. Because, I'll be honest, I've never feared death, but I've always feared other people dying, like in my life, and how I will cope with that when it inevitably does happen. There will be people in my life who will die, unfortunately, before me. And what's interesting, actually, before I started reading this book already, recently in the last year or so, maybe not quite a year, in the last 6 months maybe, I've been thinking about the fact that we as humans are really bad at dealing with death, considering the fact that we're all gonna die. Like, that is the only certainty in life, and yet we're still not very good at coping with it. Sorry, I know I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but I think if you can handle it, this book is definitely worth a read. But as I say, it is very, very intense and will have you thinking about life differently, probably. So that's my pitch on that one. Moving on, I was flying through these books, so I went for another non-fiction. And I couldn't decide, and the irony in that is that I ended up picking a book called The Art of Decision Making by Joseph Bickart. I'm so sorry about my pronunciations. This book, when I finally decided to pick it up, really annoyed me because I am the most indecisive person in the world. I am so indecisive. I really struggle making decisions. And I picked up this book knowing that it probably wasn't going to be able to change my life, but at least maybe give me some helpful hints. It didn't. Because the thing about my decision making is that I overthink everything. I think about all the pros, all the cons, and then like every little detail that goes along with it. And this book was encouraging you to do that in a way, at some points. And I think as I was reading this book, about halfway through, I didn't tell anyone that I was reading this book, but out of the blue, my father sent me a picture of a quote in Dutch, which doesn't translate very well in English. In fact, it doesn't translate at all. But the quote is, "Volg je hart, want dat klopt," which literally translates to follow your heart because it beats. But in Dutch, the word for beats is also right. So it would actually be like saying follow your heart because it's right. But right also means like it beats. It's hard to explain. And I felt like that piece of advice will help me so much more in my future than this book. And so that really annoyed me. Because there I was, it wasn't a very long book, but still, I was like, I'm going through the effort of reading a book to try and help me with my decision making, and it's not really delivering at all. But it was still a good book. I just think if you're going to pick it up, don't go into it expecting for your world to change, I think. Moving on, I was like, right, we're going to go into a fiction now. And this one is called Book Lovers by Emily Henry. And I actually originally had You and Me on Vacation by the same author on my like to read list, but it was on the waiting list in my local library. So I saw this other one, Book Lovers, hey, that's me. So I thought, yeah, let's read it. This was a joy to read. This made me really happy. It was a very light, easy read, in my opinion. I mean, there were like some intense things, but it was like, I would say it was a young adult fiction, but it was just sweet and a romance, and you could kind of see where it was going, but there were some extra like twists and turns thrown in. And yeah, it was just a really easy read, really adorable, and just made me feel really warm and happy. So would recommend. That was probably one of my favourite books I read this month, but we're not done yet. We've got 2 more. The next one, I went back to non-fiction, is A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. And this, I think, was a shortened version, because I read it as an audiobook and it was about 6 hours and 50 minutes maybe. But when I looked on Storygraph, which is where I track all my reading, there were editions that were like 13 hours long or 18 hours long or something along those lines. So I don't know if this was a shortened version of it. Again, this was a good book, but it wasn't my favourite. I am absolute rubbish with science, and so I was hoping this would kind of help. But in the end, it was just a little bit too dry, I think, for me, and a little bit too complicated. I don't know, I think maybe this is a good book, and that's why it is on my list. And I definitely did learn some things from it, but a lot of it just went over my head. And maybe that was also because I was reading those last few books all like one day at a time. So I was flying through information and, books. So maybe I shouldn't have read it when I did. I don't know. But it wasn't as good as I was hoping it would be. But it was still good. And then we've got one more, which I finished 2 days ago. And that was, again, back to a fiction book. Another young adult fiction called Paper Avalanche by Lisa Williamson. I've read a couple of books by Lisa Williamson. I was first introduced to her with The Art of Being Normal, which I read probably about 6 or 7 years ago now. And then I think maybe it was last year or the year before I read All About Mia, which I can't really remember much from. But anyway, saw Paper Avalanche and thought the blurb sounded interesting. And I knew I kind of liked the author. This book was okay. It was fine. It was good. It's probably a really great young adult fiction, but I think I'm a little bit too old for it now. And I think also when I'd already read Book Lovers, which was also a young adult fiction, totally different sort of stories, really incomparable. But when I'm looking at those two young adult fictions, I would definitely lean towards Book Lovers. But it was a good premise and it was an easy read and enjoyable, so I'm happy I read it, but I wouldn't recommend it quite as highly as I would Book Lovers if you are older than young adults. Anyway, that's that. So lots of books this month. I'm quickly going to run through the last few items that I've got on my favourites. I say quickly, we'll see if that actually happens. The next thing I've got on my list is musicals. I've got Between the Lines. I listened to the cast recording of this and I read the plot alongside it, and it just sounds like totally my thing. I want to see a production of it, or I want to be in a production of it. It just sounds very, very up my street. And I love the music. It's very good music. Which brings me beautifully onto my music category, and I've only got one here, and this one came totally out of the blue. It's called Locked Away, and it's probably a song you all know. And for some reason, and I have no idea what prompted this, it just came into my head one day and I looked it up on Spotify and I was like, oh, I actually really like this. And I don't know why I know it. I don't think it's because it was on the radio. I think it's because it was either in a video or I did a dance to it or something. I don't know, but I really enjoyed listening to it. On to fashion, I'm going to show you these things. If I showed you my flaws. Alright, so first of all, I've got these totally battered red sandals. According to the thing on the foot, it says it's from a company called Wild. These are, I want to say, almost 10 years old, which is why they look the way they do. They are also, I think, about a few sizes too big. Like these bits where it kind of has torn away, that's where my toes end. If I'm like in the back, my heel's in the back. They say they're an Australian size 7. I'm probably an Australian size 4, I think. So that is why they look the way they do. But when I bought them initially, I bought them because they were really comfortable sandals, and I find it really hard to find comfortable sandals, especially ones with like where your toe goes through, because usually they're like rubbery and they give me blisters and things. These, lovely, really comfortable. And I've been wearing them a fair bit. I can't wear them too much because they're too big. They end up sort of getting caught more than anything. Like, because my toe ends up over here, this flap keeps getting caught on things and my foot slides around in them. But if I could buy another pair that was my size, I would definitely recommend them. And you know what? For 10 years of wear, the fact that they're still standing is pretty good. So that's a favourite of this month. And my second favourite, I might have mentioned this before, but I'm not 100% sure, is this beautiful makeup palette. I bought this, I want to say during COVID with my mum. Well, she bought it for me because I needed some neutral colours for headshots and auditions and things. And I've been wearing it a lot the last few weeks, and I really like it. And it's cruelty free. The colours are like really nice on my eyes, and it's the perfect size to take with. Can you see the colours? They're so nice. So yeah, big fan of that. Alright, moving on to our final category, which is other. The first one is a sort of website called Upbeat, where I found some more royalty-free music to use for my vlogs. You probably won't hear them until the new year, at the rate we're going, but it's nice to have a bit more variety in my vlog song music thing. The next one is a YouTuber called Lucy Moon. I've heard her name countless times, both through Dodie and Hannah Witten, and I'd sort of finished all my watch later and I'd finished my books. This was, after I'd finished my books. And I just thought, yeah, why not? And she's a fashion YouTuber and I really like her style. I find her voice very relaxing to listen to. I like the aesthetic of her videos. So I'm a fan. And last but not least, you're all gonna laugh. I've got an app called Water Sort, which is a game, but it's just a really satisfying game and I like the logic behind it. I really enjoy it. So those are all my favourites. My song of the month is Another Chapter from Between the Lines. I heard this song because of Carrie's video. She did a vlog of her concert and her opening song was Another Chapter. And then I just listened to it on repeat and it makes me very happy. All right, half an hour later, we've done our favourites. Thank you for sticking around. Let me know if you've read any of the books I spoke about, or if you have any recommendations for things, or if you want to share your favourites of the month or of your life, I don't know. And I'll see you all very, very shortly with another video. Bye!